Alright guys, today's video we're going to talk about deer bedding areas, buck bedding areas. Now actually a lot of people are getting their hopes up. There's a lot of people out there on YouTube and habitat consulting guys that will emphasize the use of bedding areas, cuttings and different strategic habitat improvements to their property, and they're describing it as in it's their own property, and everybody else watching thinks they have to implement that onto their property, and it can actually make their property worse. What's actually happening is the people that are making the videos and teaching these techniques are using trigger words such as buck bedding, deer bedding, things of that nature, and it actually triggers people. That's what it is. It's a trigger word, so it triggers people and it makes them excited because they hear the word buck bedding. Oh, if I do this strategy, that I can bed this buck, this very specific buck on my property, and nothing could be further from the truth. What you do actually have to realize is we are trying to control a wild, free-ranging deer, and we cannot control every movement of their daily activity. It's just not going to happen. Now, it is actually 100% true that we can make bedding areas on our property. Is it going to be a specific buck bedding area? Nobody knows. It's a free-ranging deer. A buck, a deer, doe in general can bed where they want to bed, but there's a time and place for it. It needs to be specific to your property, not just what from somebody says on a YouTube video. People emphasize bedding areas, and bedding areas are a great tool to use into improving your property in certain situations. If you have really small property, bedding areas may not be your best bet, because you can put these bedding areas in and then all of a sudden you have all these deer that's bedding on your property if you have the food, and then it leaves you no room to maneuver around your property, which is very unfortunate because you're going to be spooking all the deer out, which in turn is going to make your property worse. On larger pieces of property, then yes, we can get into bedding areas. We can get into making specific bedding areas if we have the food, because then we can control the bedding and then the food. We can catch them in between, hunting them in between, which still leaves us room to maneuver around our property to access the bedding area for a morning hunt, closer to food in the afternoon hunt. But on these small pieces, emphasizing bedding because somebody uses a trigger word of buck bedding or something of that nature, and then this person implements that on their property, and it just makes it worse. I see this daily, almost daily, from consulting and visiting clients where I get there and they have implemented every single strategy on their property that somebody teaches, and it literally ruins the entire property. Me and Chris just had a talk about this the other day, saying it's giving people false hope, and it really is, because just because you have a food plot, just because you cut some timber to make a bedding area, doesn't mean a specific deer is going to bed on your property. There's guys out there that will tell you, hey, if we make this specific bedding area, we get a shovel and we shovel out the dirt, we put a log there, and we can get a buck to bed there. That is just false, giving the client false hope, trying to rob their money. And one thing on this channel, I will never give you false hope in trying to improve your property. There's 100% things that we can do to the property to improve it, right? But there is a time and place for everything. I'm also very curious on the size property that you guys manage. Just let me know, comment down below, and let me know. 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 acres? Let me know. Everything revolves around food, right, to a deer. Think of it like this. You ever go to like a cookout or a party or something, and there's always that guy that kind of lingers around the kitchen, lingers around the grill, waiting for the food to be done. That's kind of like how deer are, right? They're going to want to be close to the food, because then they have to travel less distance to get there in time, before it gets daylight out. If it's like a kill plot, those big open food plot areas, they may wait till after dark. But in some cases, in low pressure areas, and if it's set up properly, I have seen those bigger food plot areas, destination food plots, become a daytime activity hangout. It just really depends how the property is laid out and how pressured the deer actually are. This also depends too, in high density deer areas, having different bedding areas can work out if the property, if it's a good property or fit for the property. In low deer number areas, you may have just one bedding area because, you know, all those deer can fit inside that bedding area. Now, even though we make bedding areas, doesn't mean that a deer is going to bed there. A deer, you know, does are pretty easy going. They can bed pretty much anywhere. A buck may have, I don't know what it is, 5, 10, 15, 20 different bedding areas that he can relate to where he feels safe. Now, if we create that bedding area on our property, and then also we have that food plot, that the destination or kill plot food source such as greens, then we can kind of help control that, but it doesn't control him 100%. Back to being at a party and you always have that person hanging around the grill or the kitchen. The point is, if I had to choose between bedding and food, I would have 100% choose food, because especially on small properties, because a buck, a deer will find a place to bed. Do we want them to bed on the neighbors? No, we don't. But if we have, say, an area, you know, state forest or something where we can't access and there's no hunting, if we have a food plot, the deer can bed on there. They travel to our, you know, property, they hit that afternoon food source, then we have good luck. But it all depends. You can't just go in and start cutting your entire property because somebody said you have to have bedding on your area, because it ruins. I see this daily, guys, and I don't want you to have false hope. I don't want you to fail at things, and I want you guys to have success. Please don't fall for these trigger words that people use, because again, it's a wild, free-ranging deer. Okay, if it's a fenced-in area, then we can control what they do. A wild, free-ranging deer, it's a little bit harder, guys. People, there's pressure everywhere. People have different food sources. The properties are different. You know, the layout of the lands are all different. So just because we have that bedding area doesn't mean that we can, you know, just doesn't mean that you actually need it. Small properties can make it worse, because then you can't leave room to maneuver around your property. Now, if you have that area where you can access it foolproof through a road, you have access on all sides, then it may be a fit. But you have to think for yourself, think how your property is laid out, and don't do it just because somebody says to actually do it on your property. You know, it's exciting. You hear the word buck, you hear the word bedding, you hear the word whatever it is that triggers somebody's mind. You know, I hear the word cheeseburger and I get excited, right? Or I hear the word steak, I get excited. It just, you can't fall for that. And I like me and Chris talked about, it's giving false hope to people, to clients that are paying for somebody to come in. It's very, very situational. Okay, you know, I know people get desperate sometimes. We want the deer. We hear this, all this, you know, we can do this, or you can plant this, you can plant this, you can plant this, and people, they just throw it in there. They just implement everything on the property, and it just doesn't work all the time. And if you guys want to learn more tips, tricks, and habitat improvements, watch this video right here. Don't forget to subscribe, guys.